How does the LDS Church's new Gospel Topics Q&A page on the topic of science and religion fit into the faith tradition's longer history of intersecting with the topic? My name is Dr. Benjamin Park. I'm a scholar of American religion and author of the book American Zion, A New History of Mormonism. Last week, the LDS Church released 3 new question and answer pages connected to its overall Gospel Topics project that try to address frequently asked questions related to controversial topics. I've already done other videos on the pages on race and women, so let's dissect the final video remaining, which seeks to understand how the LDS Church relates to science and religion. Now, let me say from the outset that there's really not much new in this page. Rather, it's a snapshot of where the LDS Church has been over at least the last couple decades in relation to intersections with prominent scientific topics. Importantly, it tries to reassert 2 primary principles that frame the way the LDS Church has approached scientific issues, especially those that have a controversial hue. First, it emphasizes that the LDS Church tries to seek truth from whatever source it can, trotting out 2 famous Brigham Young quotes of "all truth in the world belongs to Mormonism." However, it's important to note that how the LDS Church has defined truth has always been contested and controversial and reflective of particular moments, and Brigham Young himself was very quick to denounce the secular truths that he believed did not fit in with the Mormon religion. And second, the LDS Church emphasizes, as seen in this quote here, that they have a broad parameter of what Latter-day Saints can believe because they do not take an institutional position on these scientific issues. Now, on the one hand, that's true. The LDS Church does not have a laundry list of where the church falls on various scientific topics. However, I think there are 2 important qualifications to this. First, while the institution itself has not taken a stance on some of these scientific issues, it is very much the case that a number of LDS leaders have taken a stance and that they have done so in quasi-authoritative manners that give the imprimatur of authority to their statements. And second, while the LDS institution may not have a laundry list of this as the institutional positions, it does frame the parameters of normative discourse, what is allowable within the Latter-day Saint Church for members to investigate, believe, present on, and research. And so it's important to note that the LDS Church still sets up parameters of what is acceptable ideas in terms of the faith's relationship to science. So with those general parameters out of the way, let's dig into first the history of the LDS Church dealing with scientific issues, especially evolution, as well as the contemporary relevance. It is notable that this question and answer page gives a particular date from which the LDS Church allegedly decided not to take a stance on scientific issues. Here you see here, it was after discussions and controversy in 1931. Sadly, the page does not get into that contentious and significant dispute that took place among LDS leaders in 1931. But fortunately, that's where over-specialized nerds like me can step in, because lots of great historians have spilled a lot of ink on this momentous occasion, which I'll get to in a minute. But first, it's important to note that this was part of a moment, a broader cultural war in America during the 1920s and 1930s, when Darwin's ideas of evolution came to the forefront for a majority of American religious traditions. This is just a few years after the Scopes monkey trial, when the teaching of evolution in public schools was brought to the courts, and the entire nation became enraptured with whether religion can really reconcile its fundamental beliefs with evolutionary theory. It was in that context that the LDS authority and prominent curriculum writer B.H. Roberts, who wrote a number of the Sunday school and priesthood manuals up to that point, decided it was time for him to add his work to that growing national literature. And he holed himself away in an apartment in New York City, just a few blocks away from the Union Theological Seminary, where they had disputed these modernist ideas. And he wrote what he believed was going to be his magnum opus, B.H. Roberts' The Way, the Truth, the Life, where he tried to fuse Mormon theology with modernist teachings, including evolution. Now, not all of his solutions were very persuasive. His way to integrate evolution into Mormon theology was to basically say that Adam and Eve came from another planet to an earth that was already existed, and that explains why the earth was so long and why there are minerals on the earth that predate human death. Again, not principles that would be accepted by many scientists or science-inclined theologians. However, it was at least an attempt because it demonstrated a strain of thought within American and Mormon thinking that you could reconcile theology with evolution. And then Roberts presented his manuscript to the church, expecting that it would be turned into curriculum, but it received opposition from the LDS apostle Joseph Fielding Smith. He was the son of former LDS President Joseph F. Smith and the grandson of Hiram Smith, the associate president in Nauvoo and brother to Joseph Smith. So in other words, he believed he had prophecy running through his veins, and though a junior apostle, he decided to exert his influence and oppose B.H. Roberts' teaching, saying that these modernist ideas, including evolution, were a corruption of modern thinking, and that the church should not degrade its theology by trying to interrogate what others are saying. I had a friend who was once doing research at the LDS History Library in Salt Lake City, and he was able to get access to Joseph Fielding Smith's copy of Charles Darwin's Origin of Species. And in the margins of that book, Joseph Fielding Smith had written, Charles Darwin may claim an ape as his ancestor, but I do not claim one as mine. So you can see the culture war mindset there. So Joseph Fielding Smith and B.H. Roberts then squared off in a series of LDS leadership meetings and ideologically duked it out. Ideologically, not physically. Finally, Heber J. Grant, who was the LDS prophet at the time, decided there's no benefit for going forward with these disputes, and that's where we get the statement that LDS authorities should stay away from these topics, and the institution is going to stay neutral on scientific issues like evolution. However, and this is what's left unsaid in the question and answer gospel topics page, is Joseph Fielding Smith did not leave it alone. He continued writing in it, both in LDS publications, like one essay in a church magazine in which he said, if evolution is right, then the church is wrong. And then he eventually published his book, Man, His Origin and Destiny, which was a vehement diatribe against Darwinian thought. And that was published by the church. So a church authority publishing work by the church, defending the church, seemed to give a sense of church authority to his anti-evolution statements. His son-in-law, Bruce R. McConkie, would later publish Mormon Doctrine, a compendium of Mormon teachings, which also denounced Mormon evolution. So it's kind of hard to say that the LDS institution has not taken a stance on these issues, because they published these works and they received lots of acclaim. I'll still note, however, there were other LDS authorities who challenged those. James Talmage gave several prominent addresses. John C. Widsoe gave addresses, but they were shouted down by the Joseph Fielding Smith and the Bruce R. McConkies of the world. And it wasn't until a decade ago that Bruce R. McConkie's Mormon Doctrine was taken out of circulation. So these stories, these disputes, are not long ago. They are quite recent. Further, wrestling with scientific issues within the Mormon tradition is still as potent today as it has ever been. And I could show this in the figure of one person, and that's Russell M. Nelson, the current president of the church. Now, I know it's common for any LDS publication or general conference address nowadays to start with a quote from Russell M. Nelson. So it's not a surprise that this page on religion science starts with a quote from Russell M. Nelson. The problem here is that Nelson represents a continued cultural clash with scientific ideology in their opposition to what they denounce as secular corrosions of doctrinal truths. So let me give you a few instances. Because on the one hand, Russell Nelson was a renowned surgeon. He pioneered a number of heart surgical procedures that are still used today. But then he utilized that capital from the scientific field to attack other scientific fields, notably evolution and the creation of the world, which are packaged into a conservative ideology opposing modernist thought. Take, for instance, this BYU and General Conference address on the magnificence of man, in which he denounces scripturally illiterate secularists who have presented theories like organic evolution or the Big Bang, which Nelson calls unbelievable. Or, more recently, take his 2007 interview that appeared in Pew, in which he said it was incomprehensible to believe that human evolution was a believable topic, saying that dogs have always been dogs, monkeys have always been monkeys. That's dog whistling for opposing that evolutionary thought, showing that it fits into a broader political matrix of the modern day culture wars and why the LDS Church tries not to side on those issues. So it shows that this cultural opposition to secular ideas as filtered through science are still seen as dangerous within the LDS setting. So where does that leave us with the overall lessons from this statement? Well, I think it's clear that this Q&A page and this Gospel Topics project is trying to provide as broad parameters as possible to encompass both the cultural warrior mindset of a Russell Nelson, but also providing enough plausible deniability that allows BYU biologists to do their work. So the page recognizes the scholarly consensus of the age of the earth, and also borrows a long-standing Christian apologia that offers a figurative reading of the days in Genesis, saying that maybe they weren't 24 hours. This stance enables the church to stay firm on its ideas of a divine divine origin, or at least a creation controlled by a divine hand, while also allowing the BYU biology department to do important work on evolutionary science. And it's important to note that BYU has a phenomenal life sciences college with evolutionary biologists who are at the cutting edge of their field. In fact, they've worked over decades to create a packet that they can hand to students to show that you can be a faithful Mormon and believe in biology. The problem, of course, is then when it's undercut, when those students leave the life sciences building, go over to, say, the Joseph Smith building, where there are still a few religion professors who will then subvert those very teachings, saying that believing in Darwin is anti-Christian. I had a religion professor myself when I was a student who made that clear in a series of slides that you can't believe in Darwin and still be a faithful Latter-day Saint. Also, when I taught religion at BYU, I was once overruled by a senior scholar in the department who tried to make that same argument. You can also see these tensions play out in the broader Latter-day Saint community. Notably, a few weeks ago, the Pew Religious Landscape Survey, a massive survey of religion in America, including a sizable margin of people from Latter-day Saints, demonstrated that only 8% of Mormons believe that humans evolved through a natural selection process, which was only about a quarter of the general public who believes. So it shows that Mormons are less willing to adopt a secular natural selection process for human evolution. But notably, the percentage of Mormons who outright reject human evolution, about 17%, is about half of what you might find in evangelicals. So Mormons are found more in the middle, trying to find ways to work it out, to maintain those foundational principles of LDS teachings, while being at least some way open to secular scientific theories. I think we should also note what topics aren't raised on this Q&A page on religion and science. Notably, if the LDS Church were to release a statement on religion and science a couple of decades ago, there probably would have been a section trying to defend that Native Americans are descendants of Lamanites, trying to dispute growing DNA scholarship that disputes that idea. The LDS Church is mostly silent on that now, which you can also see in their Gospel Topics essay a decade ago on the Book of Mormon. But there are two topics that don't appear here that probably will surprise and disappoint a lot of Latter-day Saints who are trying to wrestle with the faith tradition's connection to contentious but significant scientific issues today. And that's vaccines and global warming. And I think it's clear why the church doesn't try to speak out on that, despite the fact that those are crucial topics in the modern world. A few years ago during COVID, we saw the great reluctance on a large majority of Latter-day Saints, at least in America, to follow the church's counsel to get vaccinated and wear masks in church. So there is a cultural undercurrent connected to these conservative anti-science views that the institution recognizes they can't really control anymore. And the second is global warming, because it is fitting into the modern day political matrix as more of a progressive cause. The church, even though it does a lot to try to address global warming, trying to create more sustainable churches and more zero-scaping for their church properties, they're actually doing quite a lot there. But they're not going to speak as much about it as they could, because they know it will alienate a large conservative base within the LDS community. So a few concluding thoughts on this science Q&A page that often overlap with the overall lessons that we took from the pages on race and women, which is one, the LDS Church still seems a bit hesitant to directly address the fallibility and the incongruence with past teachings of authorities on these topics that don't fully square with the present. You see this more on some pages than others. On the race page, the church is willing to come out and say past leaders were wrong on saying various things on race. But you don't see that here, in part because the anti-science teachings that make LDS Church uncomfortable today are more recent. It's a lot easier to denounce Brigham Young for his racism in the 1850s than it is to denounce Joseph Fielding Smith in the 1950s. And second, I think you can see how the church is packaging its ideas, including its curriculum on these pages, with a hesitancy to alienate a large conservative base of the church that they worry would read some certain statements within a political taxonomy. It's kind of unfortunate to reflect on this, how it connects to Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous letter from Birmingham jail, when he says that the church used to be more of a thermostat where you can change the temperature instead of being a thermometer, which has become where it just reflects the general temperature. And I think you can see that with these statements, to where the LDS Church is more reflecting the current cultural understanding of the faith rather than trying to push it in different prophetic ways. All right, that's my analysis of the science and religion page. If you haven't seen them already, please go and see my videos on the race page and the women on the priesthood page, as well as my other videos on related topics. If you like geeking out on history of religion, not just Mormonism, but American religion and politics and culture more abroad, please follow my channel and share whatever videos you like with your friends.